Hearken, brave souls, what if I told thee that in the days of steel and shield entire armies fell in minutes, not by greater numbers, nor by the mightiest of swords, but by cunning, foresight, and the mastery of human nature? From the whispers of the wind across sunlit ridges to the shadowed folds of river valleys, the most feared tactic of medieval warfare was born, a trap wrought of deception, timing, and terrain, turning pride into folly and speed into ruin. Knights charging with all their glory became ensnared, archers struck true from hidden posts, and the battlefield itself seemed alive, devouring those who dared the lure. Gather close, for I shall reveal the secrets of ambush, the feigned retreat, the killing zones, and the art of breaking morale before swords ever clashed. Stay thy hand on the scroll, like and subscribe, for the tale of devastation awaits thee. The tale I tell is of fire and steel, of men swept aside in minutes, not by the weight of armor nor the fury of lances, but by the cunning mind that read hearts and armies alike. In those days of medieval warfare, no man could count on numbers alone. Knights and infantry alike understood that a battle's outcome rested upon craft, anticipation, and the choice of ground. The strongest charge could falter, the mightiest sword could bite nothing, if a commander of foresight had drawn his enemy into a snare hidden in plain sight. I have walked the fields where thousands fell before the sun had climbed high. I have heard the cries of men as order dissolved, as pride turned to terror. It is a sight both dreadful and compelling, for it is here the essence of strategy shines brighter than any forge, fire, or gilded helm. The most feared tactic was not one wrought from numbers or steel alone, but from the knowledge of men's nature, their impulses, their desires, their blind faith in courage. Deception, terrain, and timing were the instruments of this art, and once employed, even the noblest army could crumble like straw before a winter wind. In the beginning, armies gathered in the open fields, the dust rising from horses' hooves, the banners snapping in the breeze. Knights mounted on steeds of iron and sinew, men clad in chain and plate, foot soldiers with pikes and axes, archers with longbows and crossbows, each knew his place and purpose, yet the victor was rarely the one with the grandest assembly. Instead, the cunning commander studied the ground as a scholar reads a tome. Valleys, hills, and narrow passes were all a canvas upon which he painted his trap. Every tree, ditch, and hedge could be an instrument of death, a guide to lead the enemy where he would falter. I have seen knights, valiant and proud, fall not to sword, but to a trap unseen, their lances useless as they stumbled over hidden stakes, their mounts rearing in terror. Archers, hidden by hedges and the bends of the land, loosed shafts that found gaps in armor, killing with a precision born of preparation. Infantry pressed forward behind shields and pavises, not for glory, but to hold the foe in place, to make the ground itself a weapon. This was a craft beyond brute strength, a battle waged in the mind as much as on the field. Consider the feigned retreat, a ploy as subtle as the shadow of a falcon on a summer's field. Light cavalry or foot soldiers would appear to break, to flee before the foe, drawing him into pursuit. Discipline was paramount, for should the retreat falter into real flight, the trap would fail, and the hunter become the hunted. At Amblev in the year 716, Charles Martel drew his foes from a strong position only to strike when their eagerness betrayed them. At Lechfeld in 910, Hungarian horsemen performed staged retreats, scattering German formations and luring them into doom. At Hastings in 1066, the Normans used the same cunning, turning Anglo, Saxon pride into disaster. Even the Seljuk Turks during the Crusades and the Mongols in the vast steppes honed this art to perfection, using smoke, dust, and signals to orchestrate slaughter before swords touched flesh. The essence of these tactics was control. To lure the enemy was not to fight openly, but to make his strengths betray him, Cavalry in narrow ground became a hindrance, infantry separated from their commanders were prey, speed became isolation, armor became weight, status became a trap. Entire armies fell not by steel alone, but by the chain of cause and consequence, each man's impulse feeding into the next, until the battlefield became a river of chaos flowing to the drum of discipline and cunning. The process began with careful observation, the placement of bait upon the field. The retreating troops showed just enough fear, just enough disorder to kindle overconfidence in the enemy. The pursuers accelerated, stretching lines, abandoning cohesion. Every step was a move upon the board, every glance a calculation. Behind the apparent flight the ground was prepared. Ditches to unseat horses, sharpened stakes angled to break charges, brush to conceal archers. Narrow lanes funneled men like sheep, creating corridors of doom. Timing held all together. Horns and banners paced the retreat, ensuring it did not descend into true panic, while observers waited for the moment when the enemy was fully committed to folly. And then, when the prey entered the trap, the killing began. Archers lifted their shafts in high arcs, raining death to disrupt. Then, as men pressed forward into the corridor, the arrows struck low and true, finding the openings in armor, the gaps at joints and visor slits. Crossbowmen loosed bolts that shattered shields, pierced torsos, and felled knights. Every fallen mount became an obstacle, every staggered soldier a blockade, multiplying the chaos. Shock cavalry, formidable in open fields, lost their power here. Lances could not find targets, speed was crushed, and the pride of the warrior became a shackle. Infantry advanced behind shields, not to duel, but to fix bodies in place, sealing exits, pressing the fallen into obstacles that trapped the living. The fight was no longer a melee, but a sequence of orchestrated calamities. Horns, drums, and banners commanded action in the dust and din, while sun and wind, rain and terrain all played their part. Nothing was left to chance. Even the very psychology of pride was weaponized. Knights felt compelled to pursue, and thus ran into the arms of death. Commanders measured each beat, each volley, each push. Foresight and discipline turned small advantages into catastrophe. The vanguard, isolated by pursuit, became the first victims. Supports compressed behind obstacles, unable to pass fresh orders. Reserves waited, poised to strike at the precise moment when momentum had become the enemy's downfall. The battlefield, though seemingly chaotic, was a symphony of calculated violence. Speed, weight, and status all turned into liabilities by the mastery of strategy. Time and weather were allies. Rain turned fields into treacherous mud, robbing mounts of speed. Sun blinded pursuers, shadows concealed flanking movements. Armies, often tired and hungry from long marches, fell prey when the trap struck late in the day. The feudal system itself lent to the effectiveness. Lords brought their retinues first, armies second, and ambitious captains could not resist the lure of glory, stepping into disaster. Even modest engineering multiplied effect. Stakes, ditches, hedges, and ruts turned a single path into a corridor of destruction. Horses stumbled, lances misaligned, and armor, once the pride of knights, became a cage of weight and restriction. Infantry, disciplined and steady, took advantage, pulling riders down, prying gaps, and multiplying damage with every passing moment. Morale broke in sequence, surprise, confusion, then fear, as high-status knights fell first, followed by all who watched. In seconds, an army's cohesion dissolved, its fate sealed before most could understand the cause. This tactic endured across centuries because it struck at constants: pride, momentum, limits of communication, biology, terrain, weather, feudal loyalties, reconnaissance failures, and human perception. Draw, narrow, fix, strike. the formula repeated from wooded European hills to river valleys and arid Levantine plains. Every victory relied not on extraordinary numbers or weapons, but on discipline, preparation, and understanding of human behavior. Drilled infantry squares, firearms, and improved scouting eventually reduced the tactic's dominance, but in its prime it was nothing short of deadly genius. The medieval battlefield was a theatre of both steel and mind. Commanders knew that one well-placed trap could decide the day, that entire armies could be broken in minutes without prolonged melee. Men fought not only against swords and arrows, but against manipulation, psychology, terrain, and timing. The lure converted every strength into liability, every impulse into disaster, and every step into inevitability. It was a lesson of history. The greatest weapon was cunning, the greatest shield was preparation, and the battlefield belonged to he who mastered both. Thus ends the tale of cunning, valor, and ruin upon the fields of medieval warfare. Remember the lessons of strategy, discipline, and foresight, for even the proudest knights fell to the trap of cunning minds. If thou hast found wisdom in this tale, give thy hand to like and subscribe, and share the story so that the knowledge of ambush, feigned retreats, and the killing zones may live beyond the annals of time. Walk with caution, study the land and hearts alike, and let the echoes of history guide thy path. Farewell, brave souls, until the next story unfolds.